Hi, LilyPod listeners and LilyTube viewers. We are here for a really exciting episode. Today, we've got a special guest. Julie Lee is not your typical keynote speaker. She does a lot of speaking, but her personal experiences with human connection changed the trajectory of her life, ignited the passion behind her I See You mission, and made her into a powerful advocate of connected leadership. Through research and stories that are both vulnerable and inspiring, Julie delivers the wholehearted message that connection has the ability to uplevel, even transform work culture, a relevant message that is right on time. Julie is the author of I See You, How Compassion and Connection Save Lives, and the children's book, Broccolipunzle, A Girl with Extraordinary Hair. And I'm going to ask you about that during the interview. With over 100 episodes on her podcast, I See You, she empowers thousands of listeners to succeed in relationships by embracing human connection. Julie lives in Utah with her husband, Rob, and two children, Samuel and Lydia. All right, welcome, Julie Lee.
Let me try that again now that I'm not muted. Thank you guys so much. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited to be on your channel.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. It's an honor to have you with us. And I want to begin this interview by asking you to tell me about your bathroom floor moment.
Ooh, my bathroom floor moment. I forget, have you read the book?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, let's just get into it.
Most of our listeners probably haven't, so.
Yeah, let's just get into it because that's the first scene of the first chapter, yeah.
Right.
So I was struggling with pretty debilitating anxiety and depression in my 20s, and my bathroom floor moment happened when I have two children, Sam and Lydia, like you read from my bio. And I used to have this ritual when it was so debilitating, this PTSD-like symptoms, flashbacks, panic attacks, that I would get my kids set up in the living room. I'd have my little girl and stuffed in her bumbo. She was about 6 months old and my son was 2. And he'd shake little toys in front of her face and they loved each other. And I would leave them for a few minutes to go to my room, and there was just a little small master bath off of it. And I would go into the bathroom and I would shut the door and lock it, and I would turn on the fan so that my kids wouldn't hear me sobbing. And I would just, I remember so many times just laying my face on the dirty, nasty, cold tile because, you know, like when you're that depressed and you're in that state, which I'm sure some of your listeners can relate to, you know, this is something that impacts all of us, whether it's someone within our family or close friend. But the bathroom wasn't clean for sure, right? I wasn't getting to cleaning the house. I was just surviving in this mode. And I would just lay my face on this gross, dirty tile and stretch my arms out and just pray to my higher power, my God, for healing, that he would come and heal me. And in fact, I remember praying specifically saying, you know, there's this story in the Bible about this woman who had an issue of blood, they talk about, and how all she had to do to be healed after 12 years was to reach out her hand as Jesus Christ was walking in the streets, to reach out her hand and touch his robe, and she was healed. And I begged for him to come so that I could touch his robe, and I would stretch my arms out across the tile, and I would wait, and I would put all my energy and faith into that. And he didn't come, and that was really hard. It was really painful. I felt very forsaken. I felt very I thought that I was worth healing in that way, and that's what I felt like love would look like, was for him to come and appear before me and do that for me. And while my faith was very small, I do feel like I was giving it everything I had, and that wasn't what happened, and that was hard. I don't know how much of the story you want me to tell you, but that's the significance of my gross bathroom floor.
You know, I actually don't see your faith as small, but I can see how you felt small in that experience with depression. And I know I've had some debilitating depression, anxiety of my own, and also digestive disorders that, and there's this gut brain connection. And when your brain's not working, your gut's not working, when you're depressed, you're anxious, when you're full of toxins, all that kind of stuff, it's really hard to feel the spirit, maybe impossible even. And I've come to a couple of conclusions from that. And I don't know, how you've seen it, but one of them is the reason Christ healed people physically before he ministered to them is so they could be in a position to feel the spirit. And second, the reason he experienced not being able to have God in him and with him and not be able to feel the spirit on the cross, because he knew we would experience that sometimes. Even if we're doing, like you said, all we can to be close to him.
Oh, that,
I want to observe something too about the story you were relating from the Bible about the woman touching Jesus' robe, because I think we don't always appreciate the magnitude of that event. First of all, if she had a blood issue 12 years, my best guess is she was probably about 24, 25 years old. And if she had had that all that time, she would have been considered by Jewish law at that time perpetually unclean and untouchable, basically. So she wouldn't have been able to marry. She wouldn't have had any man interested in her. Obviously, she couldn't have had children in that situation. And it said she'd spent everything she had on doctors trying to figure out what was wrong. And the response that Jesus gave after she was healed, I think there's two really interesting things about it. First of all, he basically said, who touched me? Who touched my robe? Well, I want to say on the theme of your book, he saw her. He knew that someone had touched his robe, and he said that power had gone out of him, that he had felt that. So he was highly attuned, even though he didn't see who it was at first. And then secondly, he gave her credit after she was healed. He didn't put the glory on himself. He said, "Thy faith hath made thee whole." Interestingly, his first word directly to her was daughter. So he was taking this untouchable, unclean woman and treating her as family, even though he wasn't that much older than her and she wasn't really his daughter. But he was welcoming her into his family. And I've always felt that was really a moving part of that story. And I think maybe, even though he didn't come in the way that you expected, maybe he did come ultimately. What is your experience with that?
well, it's interesting you'd ask that. So we talk a lot, and this is we talk a lot about in religious and spiritual contexts about the miraculous moments that you can't blame on something else or call a coincidence or things like that. And I think for me, most of the time, feeling close to God or to Christ or deity in general is in smaller moments that are really personal to me, that aren't fireworks and that aren't as obvious if I'm not being aware. However, I did have a pretty miraculous moment. It was probably a couple weeks later, and I feel very fortunate to have had this happen. But like I said, I had a son at the time that was 2, and he was walking, just toddling around. And 2-year-olds, like, they know what they're saying, but no one else does. And they're just like, blah, 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 and they're just jabbering. And there's not a lot of like coherent things to understand. And I was in my kitchen and I was actually journaling because I was doing all the things I could to get better. And I know journaling is a really powerful thing. So I was journaling and I was crying, but I had my hand over my face like this and just trying, so he couldn't see me crying, but that I could do my work. And because another side of my story, and we don't need to get to it, or we can if we want, but is that I grew up with a parent that had a really severe mental illness and was really impacted by that. And so this was all of this, me struggling with this was just not what I expected for my life. And I had a lot of resistance to it. But because of that, I was especially careful with my own children, with how much they saw. So I'm writing in my journal, and my 2-year-old, he just toddles in and he's trying to talk to me. He's like, mom, mom, one of the few words he knows how to say, mom, mom. And I wipe my face and I look at him and I say, Sam, what? Sorry, buddy, what was it? And he just looks at me and he just says, Mom, Jesus loves you.
Wow.
And then he just toddled away, jabbering again. And I tell you what, I just looked up at the ceiling and I said, thank you, because
out of the mouths of babes.
he never said anything like that before. And it's interesting that I used to hold him up, and I have a picture of Jesus in my home, and I would hold him up and I would show, and I would say, Sam, Jesus loves you, And so certainly I could find ways to make that a coincidence. But I just know, and I just knew in that moment. And I didn't even have this big, warm spiritual feeling that sometimes we hear stories about. It was just a very quiet peace, just for me, that
shifted.
Yes, he did not show up in the way that I asked and begged for. But it didn't mean he didn't see me and he wasn't 100% aware of my life and with me. And I think, sometimes when I speak to, I do a lot of speaking with schools and corporate audiences. When I speak to a religious audience, I like to ask the question, because it's something I've thought a lot about, on the bathroom floor. I don't know that what I wanted was a God. I think I wanted a magician. And talking about asking that question to ourselves of, do I want a God right now, or am I looking for a magician? And what is the difference between those two? And so I pray a little differently than I once did. And I still, oh my goodness, I have all the respect in the world for that girl on the bathroom floor, that just the grit that it took to get up and go and take care of her kids and put on a happy face as much as she could, because what I was going through felt impossible. It felt like more than anyone could handle, for me personally, and with my childhood experiences and the trauma. But I'm just so stinking proud of her. And I feel like I'm continuing to learn and to trust God in a different way. That's been really meaningful to me, really powerful.
That's such a great example of seeing yourself,
Yeah.
seeing that person that was struggling, and having empathy and compassion and even encouragement for her.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I try. She's special to me for sure. For sure.
The woman that touched Jesus' robe, she might have been healed instantly kind of by a grand magician, but she waited 12 years for that healing. Yeah. And I'm sure there were a lot of moments when she got hopeful about some treatment that a physician had given her, and then downcast because it wasn't working. And, I'm sure over and over again, she had experienced that pain and disappointment and all of that. And it took her a long time to find the master healer. And, maybe that is similar to your journey in a way, and not having immediate healing, but really wanting it, And
Sure.
My heart goes out to that girl on the bathroom floor too. It sounds like it must have been really trying, and kind of gives you a hopeless feeling unless you know the outcome. I wanted to ask you, what does the phrase "I see you" mean to you? You named your book and your podcast both that title.
Well, I see you is an interesting phrase, because I made a friend we actually went to the same therapist, and this was at a pretty low point for me. And we found a way to get each other's information. It's a long story, but basically we met as strangers at a park. And she had had a lot of similar experiences that I did. And we had a similar disposition. We were both like driven, happy girls that just like, we don't get depressed, right? We choose not to be depressed. All those things we both believed growing up. And for some people that works and some it doesn't. But I had never been able to talk to someone so openly and just feel like she understood. And so it was fun that she would text me these words like, hey, I see you. Like, and it just was like, I'm present with you. I get you. I'm in your corner. Like, I know the things that you think are the worst about yourself. And I got you. And about 9 months later, after we met, it was my birthday, and she gave me a bracelet, and I actually wore it today. And it says in cursive, I see you. And there's an Idina Menzel song called I See You that's pretty special. And she talks about how, to the brokenhearted, to the people walking home alone, all the things like, I see you. And I think it's just that, and another, I'm piecing this together like a patch quilt, but I see you means so much to me. There's a quote from Shall We Dance? And they're actually specifically talking about marriage, but I think the same is for just our responsibility as human beings in this world. And it says, your life will not go unnoticed because I will notice it. Your life will not go unwitnessed because I will be your witness. And to me, that's really the heart of I see you. That kind of definition really clings to my heart. There's also, if it's okay, I'm going to read, it's actually off my book, which feels pretentious, but it is right here. This is I see you. And it says, there is nothing you need to do, no requirements you need to meet to be deserving of my complete attention. Just simply breathe and you've done it. That's really just this idea of being present with people in the moment, in the good and the bad, and really getting rid of distractions so that you can touch them on the shoulder when they talk and make eye contact, witnessing each other's lives in not a passive, unintentional way, but with intention. And I believe it so much because it truly saved my life multiple times, people willing to be in that space for me. And I don't know that we always realize the impact we have when we can truly see someone, the way we can change the trajectory of their life. And I'm a witness of that because it happened to me.
I actually think that, I think that sounds a lot like Real Love by Dr. Greg Bear. We did an interview with him, and we've also read his book. And we, he talks about finding wise people who accept us as we are and who can be in a non-judgmental space and love us no matter what we do or how we show up. And I think the way you described your mission and your focus is a really good example of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Julie, it reminds me of the experience I had shortly after getting divorced. And it's quite interesting. They've done functional MRIs of people's brains who are going through an unwanted divorce compared to a control group and so forth. And what they found was astonishing. Their brains light up in the same places that someone who is experiencing physical torture or pain. Now, that isn't true of any other negative emotion. It isn't true of sadness, depression, anger, any of that. Only when you're feeling rejected. So I think there's a survival mechanism in that. I think we're supposed to feel pain when we're rejected because in primitive times, if you got kicked out by your tribe, you were probably going to die. And it threatened your survival. I mean, as a baby, you survived because somebody loved you. And I think it is really deep in our DNA, if you will, to be, to need to be seen, to need to be loved, to need to be paid attention to. And I felt that physical pain in the form of waking up every day feeling like I'd been kicked in the stomach and carrying that around all day long and taking it to bed every night. And it was relentless. And there were two things that got me through that without taking my own life, literally. And that was my faith and my friends. because both of those things could help me feel less empty and afraid. And so I relate to a lot of what you're saying on that. And I think our listeners do, that many of them have been divorced or experienced, the death of a spouse, which is also a very traumatic event.
And when I was feeling rejected by my first husband, I remember feeling this pain, like what you talked about, that like I didn't know it was possible to survive that kind of anguish.
Yeah.
And I think, and we call it the ache that comes from divorce and loss, and it can be as painful as anything we've ever experienced, like in our bodies, even though it comes from initially from emotion and grief.
Julie, you write in your book, I think, about your husband Rob joining you on the bathroom floor. Tell us about that and about anything else you want to tell us about Rob in this whole process.
Well, what's interesting actually is, so you might be referring to in the dedication I wrote for Rob, who refused to let me sleep alone on the bathroom floor. I have never been loved so fiercely. So what's interesting is that actually is talking about a different context of the bathroom floor, which I think we can probably all relate to when you're like so mad at your spouse that I was like, I remember we'd probably been married this time that I'm referring to that he knows about. We'd probably been married about 1.5 years. And actually this was right before I had my first mental breakdown. So that's interesting. And we gotten in a fight about something. We argued about something and I was just so mad at him, but we were staying at someone else's house at the time. We were living out of state and we were kind of renting a room out of some family friends. So I couldn't like go out in the main areas without creating a scene. So we just had our room and a little bathroom off of it. And so I took my pillow and my blanket and I went and I put the pillow on the bathroom floor and my blanket, and I just was mad. And I laid there, and just a minute or two later, and he was mad too, I hear him come in and he put his pillow next to mine and he gets down next to me with his blanket and he's like, I'm not going to let you sleep on the bathroom floor alone. And it was just this really funny moment where it's like we both were still mad at each other, but there was this overarching like, but I love you. Like, I don't like you right now, but I love you. And I just cannot let my wife sleep on the bathroom floor by herself. It just feels wrong. And so it's a pretty funny story. But yeah, like it's, oh man, through all the mental health stuff, I know you guys have been through so much. Just the bit I know about you, when a loved one is sick in multiple different ways, it was a struggle. It's been hard on our marriage, trying to figure out how to communicate about it. But what I really appreciate is at the end of the day, he has stuck by my side through everything, He has never given up on me. He has always believed that I could do anything. He teases me. He works in the business world, does really well at what he does. And he teases me and says, like, if you knew how to do what I did, like if you got trained on it, he's like, hands down, you'd be better at my job than I am. And while I don't know that that's true, it has made a huge difference in my life that he has always had that confidence in me that I could do anything I wanted to. And that's a pretty special gift he's given me as a spouse.
Yeah. Did you feel like at some point you did touch the robe of Christ, or that you came out of this darkness that you were in?
Yeah. Yeah, not in the way that I was expecting on the bathroom floor day. And it's been little by little in some ways, but I don't know that I will ever not be more susceptible than some to anxiety and depression. I will take medication probably for the rest of my life and do maintenance therapy for the rest of my life because it makes me really happy. Those resources keep me in a really good place. And not that I don't still have my struggles, but yeah, I have felt light poured into my life as I have used this to help other people, to help leaders connect with their people better, how to treat people at work. I have very much so felt the robe of Christ in my life as I try to partner with him and helping people feel his love. And, you know, in a business setting, or a speaking gig, like I will use some different vocabulary because of the audience I'm in front of. But to me, it's all the same. It's all eternal truth. Learning about my God and about how he has asked me to treat other people. It's all the same. It's just sometimes different words depending on the audience. And it's been one of the greatest honors of my life. So absolutely, I felt his healing power in my life. And I live a really beautiful life. I love it. I really love it.
It seems like a lot of that healing, if I'm hearing you right, was kind of channeled through other people. Is it in seeing or being seen or both?
I would say both. I think I was seen. I don't know that I could have done a lot of me seeing others. And I talk about this. I have a chapter about self-compassion. If you want to be in a position to help other people like that, you have to be able to do it for yourself. I would not have been able to do this. I can't do it from the bathroom floor. Or in my book, I talk a lot about being in the hole. And when you're in the hole, you can't really help other people. You can't. And so I think for me, my motivation did come a lot from my kids and my husband, wanting who I wanted to be for them. And like I said, my experiences growing up and watching what can happen when something like this does consume you. And I don't say that meaning shame upon it or anything. It's just a natural consequence sometimes of the people you love also being hurt. And because of that, I felt I was more accepting and desperate to let other people see me so that I could get better. And as I've continued to get better, my capacity to do that for others just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's been incredible. It's been incredible to be in a position where I'm okay with me, and I still need it. We all need it. Like, you never graduate from needing that human connection, right? But I'm not in the hole anymore, and I have a greater capacity to do that for others because I saw that behavior modeled for me, and I saw the impact it can have up close and personal. So I'm incredibly motivated to try to do what I can for other people that way.
That was actually the hardest part for me, being in the hole, is knowing how it was affecting my family and not being able to do anything more about it than I was doing. And
Absolutely.
I had a lot of hole moments after we got married and before we started Love in Later Years. In fact, the book Intentional Courtship, which we started with, and then we started the group and the podcast and the YouTube channel and all of that all kind of stemmed from finally at least coming out of the hole enough to function well enough to start doing those things. And also from a loss. We got pregnant in 2019 and we miscarried. And so instead of having a real baby, which, you know, was really impossible with the way my body's condition was, and I wasn't even fully aware of what was going on. It took a long time to even get diagnosed and figure out, you know, what I was dealing with, which ended up being an autoimmune condition and a digestive disorder that stemmed from it, which means I had to, you know, rebalance all my hormones and, you know, take thyroid medication and change my diet and, you know, all this stuff. And it was kind of during all of that figuring out and that after that loss that, you know, we were like, well, we can't have a real baby, we'll have a book baby. And we just, you know, went another direction. And I think sometimes what we believe we want, what we know we want, and that doesn't work out, you know, we end up being able to do other things. I know also, like, the divorce I didn't want ended up leading to me teaching more full time. Like, instead of having 5 students, I ended up with 30 something. And so I've, in a sense, I've been a part of raising, you know, or at least just a small part in raising other children, you know, and when my children were gone, and because we had 50-50 custody sharing, and, you know, I tried to look at that as a gift, and be able to adjust to, you know, what I wouldn't have planned for myself.
I love that.
Julia, I would like to ask you, for our listeners that say, don't have a Rob to come and join them on the bathroom floor with a pillow and a blanket, who have lost that either through death or divorce, or who maybe never have had the blessing of being married, and feel alone. What can those people do if they're suffering or struggling to see and be seen?
I think sometimes it's really hard things like that we have to be humble because we have no other choice. And it's learning moments. And I think we all run up against that. And especially where you don't have that person in front of you, you don't have someone like that to rely on. I think it's so important to reach out and advocate for what you need. That's the greatest amount of self-compassion I think you could give yourself in that moment, is calling a friend, calling someone and saying, hey, I'm really struggling and I think I really need someone. And for me, I would have to force myself, I literally would, like, in my head, I was like, this isn't even going to help, but this is what my therapist told me to do. So I guess I'll do my homework, but like, so convinced, like, there's nothing that can help me. Like, it's a mind trip when you are that low. It's really sometimes mind over matter, choosing and trusting other people that have really great advice and are able to see the sun still. Because in the hole, I couldn't see the sun. I was like, it's not real. Like, that's how it felt. I'm not happy. I've never been happy. It's just such a mind trip that I really had to intentionally reach out and ask to be seen. And while there will be people that don't understand or that are insensitive or things, I don't think it'll take. There are really good human beings out there, and we are a lot more alike than we think. I think you keep reaching out and you find your people. You find people. I did, and like I said, like, what was that?
It seems counterintuitive, like the things that you can do to feel better. It's the opposite of what you want to do.
Totally.
And I know therapists call it opposite action, taking opposite action of what you feel like doing so that you can get stuck.
The girl on the bathroom floor doesn't want to talk to anyone, but needs to.
Yeah, but needs to.
And I mean, I relate to that. Now, I did, when I was going through my divorce, I did recognize that. And I reached out to friends I hadn't talked to in 2 decades, along with other friends that mission companions and other people.
Right.
And I was nervous to do that. I was really, actually, nervous doesn't describe it. I was afraid to do it because I thought they're going to, say, who are you again? Or, what is, what does your life have to do with mine anymore? You haven't talked to me in 20 years. And now that you're bummed out and need a friend, you're calling me. You know what? Nobody said anything like that. No one even gave the impression to me that that was how they felt. They even, like a mission companion I hadn't talked to in 15 or 20 years, who had been through a divorce, became one of my closest confidants during all of that. And it was so nice to be able to talk to him because he had been down that path and he knew the pain that I was in. And, it was, that connection was really important. My cousin who had been divorced became my best friend during that period because he knew what I was going through. And he's, other than Cathy, he's still my best friend. So, yeah, I think sometimes maybe life and God gives us adversity so that we can increase those human bonds and understand how important that connection is. Would you speak to that a little bit?
Oh yeah, I really relate to that. And even with challenges that have happened since those really dark years, those 5 to 6 years that were really, really tough in that way. I've had my moments again where I've needed to reach out and talk to people that I haven't talked to in forever because I just need somebody. And in different circumstances, whether you're not married at all or you're divorced, there are times when those people can't serve that role for you, or they're going through their own stuff and it can be really lonely. And I absolutely, that rang true to me when you said, I think sometimes adversity, like the blessing of it is that it increases our human connections with people that we wouldn't otherwise connect with because we're just distracted and we it's not top priority because we're not just in survival mode. And sometimes we're in survival mode and it's like, no, I need anyone to talk to. And I've struggled with those same fears. As much as I've worked on this, I still struggle sometimes with that, where I'm like, I kind of want to call this person, but like, maybe that's weird. Like maybe they don't, and I don't want to drain them and all the things. But people are just so good. They're so good. And if they're not, then you move on, because there's so many good people out there, there's so many good
Our
people.
brokenness is our bond. We're all broken in some ways, or at least we think we are, or feel we are.
Well, and I just recently heard this statement, and it's been on my mind a lot this week, that struggle is what brings us confidence in our capacity as human beings. And if we were deprived of that, we wouldn't grow as much. And I think maybe going back to what you said, do I want a magician or a God? And a God who, ultimately knows what's best for us. And sometimes that means to allow us to struggle to grow our confidence and our capacity.
Absolutely. Amen.
So now there's a little thing, curiosity, and I don't know if there's anything behind this or not, but I've listened to quite a bit of your podcast. And you have 100 episodes or something like that. And you said during the early episodes, as I remember, your sort of introduction was, I see you, let's be friends. And then later it's just, I see you, but the let's be friends isn't there. So is there a story behind that, or is that,
Oh, that is so funny. When I took that off, I did not realize what the reaction would be. I've had so many people like, you don't want to be friends anymore? I'm like, no, I was worried.
I did have that curiosity.
No, it's great. I'm glad you asked, so we can set the record straight. No, I think that that's how I done it. And then I had listened to a lot of other podcasts and they had said something similar. And I think I was worried that it sounded contrived or fake. And I was like, no, I really do want to be friends. But I heard so many that I felt like, oh, these are sounding kind of similar. I thought mine sounded heartfelt, and I just took it off, and I was not expecting anyone to even care or notice, and they cared. And
Well,
there's not a big story behind it, but it was just kind of and people that were like, please, will you put it back on? And I was like, yeah, I will. And then I forgot and never did.
Yeah, I actually I've always gotten the impression that you want to be friends. I mean, I'm
glad.
I'm glad I see you virtue that you share.
Yeah, we're glad to consider you a friend. So
thank you. Yeah, right back at you.
I've actually got a question for her.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, we talk about reaching out to Christ, to his robe, and to reach for healing and to have faith in healing. And I'm wondering if there's anything you did, so for our listeners that might be struggling with depression or anxiety, if there's anything you were led to that helped you heal, not just, through spiritual means, but through action.
Yes.
Something.
Yes. Yes, because I think it is an easy trap to fall into of that spiritual means praying it away or fasting it away and things. And not that those aren't really powerful things that have real power, but I 100% learned both through spiritual and just like logical trusting, for me, science and different things, that Heavenly Father wants me to be happy, and that there are a lot of blessings that are already on the earth that are for us, and a lot of revelation that's been given for us. And so for me, I felt, what's interesting is there was actually time, and you spoke to this, where it's really hard to feel the spirit when you're in that space, like if almost impossible maybe. And I've had very few times, I'm even thinking, I don't know if I've ever had a time where I've had words come in my mind specifically. People talk about that. And I think, unless I'm not remembering right now, this is the only time I've had words come into my mind. It was one night within these years, and I had kids at this point, kind of around the bathroom floor, Jesus loves you time. And I couldn't sleep. My anxiety was so bad, and it was like 2:30 in the morning. And I'm just kind of, my husband's asleep next to me, and I'm just kind of turning back and forth, just crying, sobbing quietly, trying not to wake him up, and just asking, like, in my mind, I just kept saying, like, what have I not done? Because at this point, it's like, I've like scavenged every list, like how to not be depressed, learn a musical instrument, make sure you're exercising, cut out sugar, cut out caffeine, which I've obviously gone back to caffeine because that's what I'm drinking right now. That was a regret. That didn't fix it. No, but like all these different things, like I was checking them off. I was going to the temple twice a week, which I don't know if what kind of audience you have, but just that's like a religious thing for me to just go ponder, and reading my scriptures, and listening to all sorts of thought leaders, including religious leaders. And so I'm just racking my brain and asking, what have I not done in this prayer? And the only time in my life that I had words come to me, and it wasn't, once again, it wasn't a warm, fuzzy feeling. It wasn't anything. It was just a clear feeling. And it was just, go to your doctor. And that's been really interesting for me, as in my situation, and no one's situation is exactly the same. Medicine has been really important for me in my healing. Medication has made it possible for me to implement the things in therapy. I remember my therapist saying to me after working with me for a while, she was like, I have never had a client that is doing so much and not having the results we should see. And she said, she's like, I'm not a pill pusher. I'm not saying it's for everyone. She's like, you are a case where I would say you may need to think about being on medication permanently, like long term, because this should be helping more than it is. And man, once I got on some good stable medication, like all of a sudden all those things on the to-do list started helping.
Yeah, you had enough control to sort of then be able to implement the other strategies.
And I was on and off medication all through those years, but I was always trying to get off because I didn't want to be reliant on it, right? Like I want to be reliant on Jesus, not on medication. And now I'm like so reliant on both. And I feel like medication is in the Jesus stuff too. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, would you tell a diabetic, you just need Jesus, you don't need
it just doesn't quite work that way. So I often, with medication, I get questions about medication a lot. There's obviously a lot of shame around it because of how much people talk to me about, how comfortable I am talking about it, and how did I get there. And the way I think about medication, the analogy I've come up with that makes sense to my brain, the only way I know how to explain it is, when I wasn't on an antidepressant, when I am on an antidepressant, like I'm in a house and I have a bad day and I fall on the ground and it hurts and it's a crappy day and I can recognize it's a crappy day, but I can still look outside the windows and see that sun is shining outside. Like I can still see, like, tomorrow could be better. Today might just be a bad day. Like I can have that understanding and awareness. When I'm not on medication, it's like falling and it's like going through a trap door in the basement and it closing and it's just dark and I can't see, there's no windows where I can see that the sun is shining. And so I can try to learn a musical instrument and journal and all these things, but the reality is, like, I don't see the reality of an outside of this, it's a trip that it's never been there either. And so for me, medication, it's like, I still fall on the ground. I still have days where I'm like, I don't want to do it. This is hard, but I can see the reality of that. Not every day is like this. These feelings are not permanent. And I've been happy before and I'm going to be happy again. And a bad day is a bad day. And that's okay. So there's a real difference for me in dealing with conflict and challenges being on and off an antidepressant. That's what makes sense to me.
I think that's a really good way of explaining it. And I know for me, back in college, I wanted to get off medication and I did the on and off again thing, thinking, okay, no, this is temporary, and then I was like, what am I doing? This is not worth it. And so, but when when the Hashimoto's kicked in for me and the digestive disorder, my needs, my mental health needs changed. And so I ended up having to, something that worked really well for over a decade ended up needing something different, because I know with thyroid issues, my antidepressant, I think to some degree was masking like the underlying cause of it. And then once my thyroid started working, then all of a sudden my medication needed to change. And so that can happen too.
Yeah.
And I know we have a friend who knows that there's like a DNA testing site where you can figure out what medication works best for you and your body.
I've done it.
Yeah. Remind us what that's called.
I don't know. I just asked my general doctor and they ordered genetic testing and did blood work. So it's really interesting. I want to say it's like genetic site, gen site, something. I don't know, but it's pretty interesting. It is not as conclusive. Like it, yeah, it's kind of, they have like red, green, and yellow category, just kind of the likelihood of that it'll work with your chemistry, but it's pretty fascinating.
Well, yeah, and then you don't have to go through quite so many really scary experimental, things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely no shame in medication. Sometimes we just need it. And it's like any other medical treatment that, when something's not firing right, when something's not functioning properly, then we need help with that.
Yep.
So Julie, you write in your book about finding the light. What are some ways that people that are feeling darkness can find the light?
I come back to connection, honestly.
Yeah.
When things are dark, maybe you don't have your own light, and you got to go to someone that does and share from theirs. And sharing from theirs doesn't look like taking their light, right? Like we think about a candle, like it doesn't hurt their light at all to give some to your candle. It doesn't extinguish it. It doesn't change it. I think reaching out and connecting with other human beings in real life as much as possible. I think texting is great, and I think it totally serves a purpose. I think having face-to-face contact is really important. Having someone that can touch you on the shoulder and give you that eye contact, I think is incredibly healing.
Well, and if you can't be there in person, I know we had Gainalyn Condi, who's a great mental health advocate, and she talked about Marco Polo being a good option if you're stuck at home, with the COVID situation that we were all in, that's a good way to have some face-to-face time in a convenient way if we are not able to be in person.
Absolutely. That's fun. Yeah. Me and Gainalyn Condi are friends. We actually use Marco Polo, and she's been on my podcast as well. She's a fantastic advocate for mental health for sure.
Yeah. We had a great interview with her on our podcast as well. So, yeah, that's a cool mutual connection. I have a question for you about Broccolipunzle.
Yay.
Well, two questions, actually.
I'm getting it out.
Number one, I think the story of how that book came about is delightful. And so I'd like you to share that with our audience. And then secondly, the message of this book is actually kind of profound. It only recently came out too. So it's a children's book, but the message works with adults too. And so talk to us about, first of all, how you came up with this crazy book. And secondly, what is the book for?
Yes.
What does it teach? That's a better way to say
it. It is the weirdest story. I would not believe this story if it had not happened to me. It is not something I could think of.
Yeah, so sometime in all of this, God gave you some words.
Yeah, I don't know. So when I was in college, I went on a first date with someone, and we went to a comedy show. And as we're walking home, he's like, "Tell me a story." He just says that, and I'm like, we were friends by this point, so we were pretty comfortable with each other. I was like, why is this 23-year-old grown man like asking for a story? Like, this is the weirdest date I've ever, I've been on. I was like, okay. And so just what came to the top of my head, I was like, once upon a time there was a princess, pretty normal start. And then, but I wanted to shake it up a little. I was like, and she had broccoli for hair. And he was like, okay, and I start telling this story, and he liked it so much that I was like, I have a children's literature assignment coming up. I was going to school to be an elementary school teacher, and I need to submit an original story. So I'm going to submit this. And so I do. And right before I need to turn it in, I remember I need to have illustrations with it. Like, shoot. So I go on, and like any resourceful college student, I like find some clip art, and I just paste this green leafy looking vegetable on all the pages, and I turn it in. And when I get it back, I got an A- on it. And I was like, I think he had built me up that this was just such an incredible story, which I can tell you a little bit more about the plot later, but that I was like kind of bugged. I was like, what's the minus for? I should have been an A. And he came over to my apartment. We were good friends at this point, and I was like, look, I got an A minus. And he just starts flipping through the pages. He's like, yeah, I think I know why you got an A minus. And I said, why? And he said, because the clip art that you pasted over, that's not broccoli, that's a marijuana leaf. And I was going to a private Christian university named BYU at the time, and I just don't think it went over well. But the crazy thing with all of this is that I married that guy, right? That's Rob. That was our first date. And the story kind of traveled around. I started using it in different religious lessons, and I started talking to kids about self-acceptance. And on my 27th birthday, he brought me a self-published version that he had made on Amazon, and he'd had a friend that was an animator do some fun illustrations. So it was an actual book that I could take with me to share with kids. And that's when I really started speaking more in the school setting. And actually, when I originally met with my publisher, it was about publishing that book about Broccolipunzle. But we kind of came out of the meeting, and I sent him a table of contents for ICU. And then he asked me, can you finish it in 3.5 months? This one I'd want it done by. And I said, of course I can. And then I got off the phone, I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? I don't even know if I want to write a book. And then after ICU did well and had a good impact, I think then we went back to, okay, it's time to publish Broccolipunzle now. And so, yeah, it just came out last month, and I added to it after having written ICU, so that the words ICU are also in this. And it's a story about, becoming a leader that is authentic, and that owns that what makes them different makes them powerful. And because of that confidence, they're able to see other people. So it's pretty special to me. It's a good one.
This time with broccoli and rather than a marijuana leaf.
Yeah. Yep. You can even see we differentiated that quite well, I think.
Yeah, I think that was just published in April. So to our listeners, if you want to get a copy while it's new.
Is it on Amazon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was just wanting to clarify something. When you were on that date and you told Rob that story, did you just make it up on the spot?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I don't think I would have used it as my assignment then in college had he not been so enthusiastic in his reaction. He's like, this is the best story I've ever heard, which he probably just wanted a second date, right? But I was like, wow, he's like, that is so creative. That's so great. And I was like, I'm the type of person in college that I did the bare minimum, I never did my reading, and I was not the best student. So I was like, well, there's my assignment. I guess I'll just use that, just, so yeah, it's crazy how it came about.
Yeah. Okay, so to our listeners, dating can lead to good assignments.
You can get work done while you're dating. So I'm all about efficiency, right?
Well, both of our dating journeys led to a book being published. So
there you go.
I've been meaning to say this during the interview, but as Jeff's been listening to your podcast, as we listen to your book, he made this observation. He's like, Cathy, Julie's like you. We're both really ambitious, and we like to be really busy, but we also know we have to take care of our health, and we have to really strike that balance, because we'd really rather be doing stuff and serving people, but then we have to remember we're human, and that our bodies can break down if we don't pay attention.
Yes, because Cathy is a human being, not a human doing.
That's a good way to put it. Yes. Yes, I've had to work very hard on that. It is not something that comes naturally, just to be still and take it. Yeah. I'm always working on it.
Yeah, me too. So
Theodore Roosevelt once said that comparison is the thief of joy. You write a chapter on that in ICU. You want to talk about that to our audience?
Yeah, I just think comparison, and coming back to this idea of what makes you different makes you powerful. the problem with comparison is we've all been given different gifts and we've all had different life experiences, and we've just all been dealt such different hands, with our biology, the way we grew up, so many things that there's really no way to compare two lives in a way that's makes sense. And I think it can really distract us from owning what's ours. And it can make it so that we don't use our gifts because we're distracted looking at someone else's. And I think about staying in your own lane a lot, where I tell a story, I think in the book, about being in driver's ed, where I had this problem where when I was driving, I would see a sign like a McDonald's sign or something, and I would look over at it and my hands would go with the steering wheel as I was looking. So then I drifted into other people's lanes. And to me, that's what comparison is. It's like you're just drifting in and out of other people's stuff in a way that's not healthy. There's no problem with looking at the signs and seeing what they're doing. That's not a problem, but it's really easy for us to start drifting the steering wheel into the well, maybe I should be like them, and where it gets to an unhealthy place instead of admiring and taking that and being like, okay, I could apply that. I like that. I want to be more like that. That's not a problem. But when we start enmeshing ourselves and our worth in other people's best, I just don't find that helpful. I don't find a lot of growth from that. I don't think I'm very productive in that thinking. And so I'm always trying to get rid of it in my own life, but it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I think it's something I always need to be intentional about.
Yeah.
We love the word intentional too.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that that pretty much wraps up what we wanted to ask you about today. Do you have parting thoughts, anything you wanted to say that you haven't been able to say yet, that you'd like our listeners to hear?
Sure. I always have stuff to say. I think what I would leave with more than anything, we're coming out of some really tough years with COVID, and that's impacted everyone in different ways. And the war in Russia and Ukraine has definitely been a painful thing for so many. And there's just I think there's been just a lot of heart in the world, and we've all struggled in our own ways. And I just really, till the day I die, will just advocate for that. I believe the healing balm that we need in our relationships, in our country, in our circles of influence is connection, is human connection, which is why I when I speak to audiences a lot, I say this phrase: connection cleans culture. Sometimes the culture in which we live, whether it's I live in a cul-de-sac, within my own community, within a church congregation, whatever it is, sometimes culture can get backbiting or mistrusting, or different things can happen that make it feel just mucky and icky. And I really feel like the healing that needs to take place comes through connection, both connection for me, with God, also connection with other human beings. We're meant to do this life together. We're not meant to do it alone. I mean, we both live here in Utah, and there's a big pioneer heritage, strong heritage in the history of starting Utah. When you think about how did they do it? How did they get across the plains and bury children and bury spouses? And how did they get through that? Well, they did it together. They were all burying family members together. That's, I believe, how they got through it. And in today's society, there are so many ways to isolate and not be together. And I believe that's really where a lot of pain and disconnection happen. And so I would just end with, I see you on the bathroom floor, if that's where you're at, and you won't be there forever. Those feelings aren't permanent. Reach out, connect. And also that connection has the ability to clean and transform a culture. And I'm excited about that.
Beautiful. And I would like to follow up with another question on that, actually, because I believe the way we create connection is through vulnerability. And I think that is something that many people, and especially men, have a difficult time with. I think sometimes we're very attentive to women that are in emotional pain because we think, they need that, but men are big and tough and strong, and they don't. And I don't believe that's true. But
I know that's not true.
Yeah, so share your experience on that, that that's not true.
Yeah, well, it's even been interesting. I mean, like the worst night of my life, I just touch on just a little bit in the book because a lot of the book, I share different experiences, but it's really supposed to be about the reader, not about me. So it's really a self-help book, but I do touch a little bit on a night where through some medication errors and in the mental state I was in where I became very truly suicidal. Um, and had to wake up my husband, have him take me to the ER. That experience was terrifying for him. It was terrifying for me. It was terrifying for him. And it's been interesting through the years when I've brought it up, he's like, no, I'm good. I don't need anything, and it's been interesting to see recently, he's really realized like, I'm not good. Like I have a lot of fear and a lot of things behind that. And I haven't really asked him permission to share a lot about that. I think he would be fine with it, but just to be careful in letting that be his story to share. I just have seen firsthand that it is not a gender thing to need connection and to need to process grief and pain. And I've seen that it can impact the way we live, the way we treat each other, the fear we hold on to, and that there's nothing, I mean, that's a human thing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's getting the help and the connection that you need that I think is so powerful. And I'm so proud of when I see that and in men, especially that grew up with maybe a different way of looking at things. Maybe you grew up with some shame around needing help, which is just so bad for society to have shame and needing help. And it's bad for women too, to hear that message. So I just will say amen and amen to that, yeah, I've seen really powerfully how men, when they open up and are vulnerable, can live a much higher quality of life and have a lot of power in their relationships in really positive ways.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I wholeheartedly endorse everything you just said. So
Good. Thanks. I like it when people endorse what I say.
tell us how people can find you if they want your book or if they want to hear your podcast or any of the other resources that you provide.
Absolutely. Well, probably the best just landing spot is my website, which is julieleespeaks.com, julieleespeaks.com. And that has all the links to all the books on Amazon. And I also, we have a metal cuff that says I see you on there that a lot of people are wearing around the world. And that's really cool, just as a reminder of our responsibility as human beings to each other. And but julieleespeaks.com is really, I mean, you can email me from there. You can see video. You can see my highlight reel, I believe, is going up today. It has links to my podcast, everything that I'm about. And yeah, I love to speak. It's my favorite, being in front of a live audience. There's nothing like it, and being able to connect with new people. I just love it so much. So I'd love to hear from you. And even if it's just feedback about the podcast, it's fun. I love to connect. I love it.
Well, we're happy to have connected with you today. And I'm sure our listeners have definitely gained from this. So we appreciate that.
Hey, I'll also add real quick, if it's okay. I do try to stay active on social media. My Instagram is Julie Lee Speak, and then Julie Lee on Facebook. I think if you do facebook.com/Julie Lee Speaks, it goes straight to my page. So, and LinkedIn as well. On all the places the kids are on these days, trying to keep up.
Well, so we're going to go ahead and sign off. And for our listeners, just remember that anytime is a great time for more love in your life. Thanks for listening and watching.